Ashley Bible from Building Book Love, and I'm going to teach you how to have a successful peer review day. You're going to do this by setting up your own peer review stations using a template that I provide you, and I'm going to walk you through all the steps you need to take, how it works, the research behind it, and everything you need to do to be successful with your own peer review stations. So here we go. First, let's get into the research so that you will know your why. John Hattie is a leading researcher for effective student feedback. After reviewing over 500,000 research studies, he found that feedback had more impact on student results than any other teaching strategy. So that is why it is so important for us to give our students fast and effective feedback. Now, in his book called Feedback, he says that we need to do 4 things when we are giving feedback. We need to affirm what students did well, correct students and direct them, point out the process, what they should be doing, and coach them to self-critique. And one of the most important points that he makes is giving is not receiving. And what this means is, as teachers, we give feedback constantly. At least in our heads we do. Studies found that teachers feel like they are giving stacks and stacks and stacks of feedback constantly. But when students are polled, they do not feel that they are getting any feedback. Now, there has to be a reason for this, and it's because the translation from all the work that the teacher is doing is not making it into the screen of the students. They do not know how to receive this feedback and how to apply it, and that's what we need to help them achieve. So how can we ensure students are receiving the feedback they need? Well, this is going to happen in the classroom. Going back to this slide, when you are writing on stacks and stacks of essays, red marks all over their essays, you spent all this time doing that, you hand back their final drafts, and they might take 30 seconds to look through it. All the time you put in to grading their essays is basically for naught. If there's not a way that they can take all the feedback you've given them and directly apply it quickly, that's another point. It can't be a month down the road when you do your next essay, but if they can't directly apply it quickly, then that feedback is not helping them to grow. So all that time you spent grading those essays did not yield many results. So what we can do to help ensure that they're getting the feedback they need is we can work in class, one-on-one, and with peers. And this presentation is going to show you how you will be able to do that, how you'll be able to make time to get to every single student to give them one-on-one feedback for their rough drafts so that they can grow in their writing. Now, a lot of teachers are afraid to use peer review stations because of a few reasons. One, they've tried them before and they've been a complete flop and failure. For example, you have a whole day planned for peer review and they exchange papers and it takes all of 1 minute for them to read the other essay and say, "Good job," or "You don't have enough," or whatever. And I've been there, done that. That does not work. You have to have a set plan, set time, set guidelines, and your practices need to be research-based, stuff that is really going to move the needle on their writing. So that brings me to the next point. A lot of teachers do not like peer review stations because they say it's kind of like, for lack of a better way to put it, the blind leading the blind. And I get that. When you are looking at students who have no idea what the writing process is, and they're with another partner and that person has no idea, then of course they're not going to be able to help each other. I'm going to talk about the research on grouping and when we get to that part, so just hang on for that. But also, the stations that you're going to use is actually not a lot of peer review. They only exchange papers once, maybe twice. It's a lot of self-directed improvement and then help from you, the expert. Even though it's called peer review, it's not going to be completely student-led, and you're not going to have these instances where the students don't know how to help each other because of the strategies you are going to be putting into place. So the research says that we need to be coaching students on how to self-critique, and there's no better way to do that than to let them self-critique their own writing using the exact same rubric you will be using when you grade their finished product. So I always use the state writing rubric. That's because I want my students to be familiar with the criteria that the state uses and will be using to grade their writing exams. So if you have a state writing test, you can use that rubric. If you have younger grades, I highly recommend turning that language into kid-friendly language. But if you use your own rubric, then that's fine. It's just whatever rubric you want your students to base their writing off of. Okay, to set this station up, I provide the writing utensils and the rubrics. The writing utensils stay at this station. And students are responsible for putting their names on their rubric and then going through here and circling what they think they deserve in each category. Then they use the back to fill in what they can do to improve. And so this one makes the point that she needs to have better transitions, a smoother transition from the book to the article. And so we go here and then we have underlined, and she's given herself a 3 there because that relates to transitions. So that is self-assessing. Station number 2 is called 3 stars and a wish. So research says that we need to affirm what students are doing well so that they will know that they are on the right path with their writing. So in this station, students exchange papers and they give the author feedback. They tell them 3 things they did well and 1 wish for improvement. Now if you tell students just that, give 3 stars and a wish, on the sticky notes and the writing utensils you provide, they'll put something like, great job on the intro, good length on your essay. That's not what we want. We want specific feedback on what they did well and specific feedback on what they need to improve. So you have to coach your students into knowing what to write on their 3 stars and a wish. So you can put these starters on their desk at that station, or you can put them on the board and teach them before they begin. There's the 3 stars, affirming what they did well, and then here's specific feedback for improvement. Okay, so the next station is word choice. Now you can do this one at a basic level or a much higher level, and I'm going to explain both. At a basic level, the students who are at this station can exchange papers or brainstorm together to come up with a better word choice for their repetitive words that they have used in their essay. Now you can use tools that pick out these repetitive words, or they can just pick up on what they've noticed. And so that would just be going through there and changing specific words in their essay to be a better word choice. Now, at a much higher level, you can incorporate mentor text in this station. So if you use mentor text as a teaching tool, what you can do is put the mentor text on the table, highlight what you want them to notice, and then tell them to write like this. Pick out some elements from these mentor sentences that you can use in your own essay and have them work through that in this station. Because the research says to correct and direct. The direct part will be directing them to mentor texts that they can see and learn from and incorporate those into their essay. The next station is Read It Aloud. Now this station will help students pick up on problematic sentences and grammar mistakes probably more than any other station you will have. However, students get really shy when they get to this station and they don't want to read out loud. So here's what I've done to remedy that. I give one person in each group the role of the countdown person. So when they get to this station, they are going to count down 3, 2, 1, go, and everybody starts reading at the same time. Now I tell them it's only awkward when you're the only person reading. It's not awkward if everybody starts reading. So that's one way. So in this next station, you're going to need technology. And if your school is not one-to-one, hopefully you can at least bring in 4 computers, 1 for each student at this station, because the technology that I'm getting ready to show you will greatly improve your students' grammar. And that means less grading for you. Now I'm going to show you the websites that students use at this station. All of these websites are free, but 2 of them offer paid versions. But of course, I only use the free versions. I highly recommend having students sign up for these accounts before you do the stations. You need to walk them through and show them how to use them, because once they get to the station, they just need to be able to paste their essays in and correct. The first one is called Grammarly, and once students sign up, they can paste their entire essay. I only did a paragraph here, but they can paste their entire essay, and it will walk them through corrections they need to make. Now, what I have them do is do a split screen to make this screen smaller and to have their essay over here and correct it directly on the essay. If they correct it within Grammarly, it's going to take away all the formatting that they have done, so just be aware of that. The next one I want to show you is called Pro Writing Aid. Now this is a new one, and it is also free, but you can only put so many words in here at a time for it to be free. So what students will need to do is paste a few paragraphs at a time, and then fix those, and then come back and paste the rest. Now you can see that it also picks up on a lot of grammar issues, more than Grammarly had over here with the free version. But here's why it is really cool. Alright, so you can go on these tabs up here to find out a lot more information about your essay. Overused words. It's picking up on the be taken, be seen, be left, be more, the BBB that she has used there. So this is showing that she has a tendency for that style of writing, and that needs to be corrected. Cliches. It found that she has top dog cliche in there. Readability, it gives you that. Easy to read, congratulations. Here's the grammar we were looking at. And then also I want to point out the thesaurus. So this is really going to help students with their word choice as long as they don't overdo it. It gives the thesaurus built in straight with the program. So that is really awesome. So Pro Writing Aid. It is free for the first 500 words, but they can copy and paste their entire essay a little bit at a time. Now you do have to use the Control-C and the Control-V when you paste it in there. And then lastly is the Hemingway app. This one I love because you do not need an account. All students do is delete the words that were in there when they came to this site, the Hemingway app, and then paste their words. And you can see that it also is picking up on the passive voice, and it's suggesting words to omit. So combine those 3, Grammarly, Pro Writing Aid, and Hemingway app, and you are looking at some serious revision. This last station is the most important because it gives time for the expert in the room, you or me, the teacher, to look at every single essay and to give specific feedback on those essays. So I'll line students up in a circle around me. The ones who I'm not working with at the moment, they're typing on their essay. But I work with one student at a time. I'm able to devote 2 to 3 minutes to that student, and I tell them actionable steps they can take to improve their essay, such as they haven't embedded their quotes correctly, they haven't used any outside sources, they don't have concluding sentences, and I just give them specific tips for improving their essay at that moment. They take my feedback and then they immediately begin correcting their essay. Now we are going to talk about the prep work you need to do to get ready for your peer review station day. So number 1 is do pre-feedback leading up to peer review day. And I'm going to walk you through exactly what I do during the writing process to ensure that the peer review day is as successful as possible. Next, you're going to determine how many groups you need. I highly recommend doing no more than 5 students per group. And I'm going to show you an additional station you can use if you need more than 6 stations to achieve that. 3, set up your stations. I just walked you through that. 4, strategically plan who will be in each group. I'm going to give you a little bit more information on that in just a second. And then get your timer set. And I've got a fun timer to show you. So here we go. Now, in order for your peer review stations to be successful, this cannot be the first time you have looked at students' writing. The process actually starts days before the peer review station day. And here's what I do to ensure all my students are ready and prepared and that they have a good start to their essay already. Okay, so we go over the topic, they do their brainstorming, and then their homework is to come up with a thesis statement. We always write the thesis statement first. That has given me so much success and my students so much success in the past. It really works, okay? Have them write the thesis statement first. Then move backwards in the introduction. Have them talk about whatever the prompt is, the context, and then give their hook. And so on that first day when they're getting ready to start their main writing in class, you have the introduction to look at. Now what I do is I tell students to highlight your thesis statement. And they highlight it in turquoise because I use color coding. So like turquoise, T, thesis, okay. But I say highlight your thesis statement in turquoise. That's at the beginning of class. And some of them are like, what's my thesis? But I just say that and I say, okay, we'll come around and check. So as the students are working on their next body paragraph, I'm walking around to every single student. I have my little clipboard and I'm putting mastered or not on there. If they're not mastered, I sit there with them and we come up with a good thesis. Now the reason I like the highlighting is because it lets me know if they really know what a thesis statement is. And that is how I can give direct feedback and instruction for those who don't know what it is and don't know how to write one. And also it is a big highlighting mark on a white piece of paper. So my eyes can very easily go to that and check within 1 minute or 30 seconds if they have a thesis and if it's good. So I get to every single student on that first main day of writing. On the next day of instruction, after the thesis check day, on the next day, I'll walk them through the highlighting process for the first body paragraph. And this is a fantastic way of self-assessment for students. It shows what you want in the essay and if they have it. And it really makes them think about the writing process. So we do our first body paragraph together, and then they continue based on what they learned from that first body. They either add to that or they continue on the next one, confirming that they are on the right path or changing and redirecting what they need to do for the next body paragraph. And again, I'll walk around and check each first body paragraph to ensure that they have their evidence, that they've embedded quotes, that they have all the things they need for what a good essay should be. So, as they finish their essay, by the time that I get to look at their final full essay during the peer review stations, I've already looked and checked the thesis and the first body paragraph. So that just leaves me the rest to ensure that they are going to have a mastery essay. Okay, now we are going to continue with the other prep you need to do. We've already covered number 1, the pre-feedback that you need to be doing as your students are writing and leading up to peer review day. Number 2, you need to determine how many groups you're going to have, how many stations you need. If you have a large class size, you're not going to be able to get by with the 6 stations. You will need a 7th one. Here is station 7. So think about a skill that you've been working on in your writing. It can be any type of skill that you've been focusing on, and have students underline that skill or circle that skill to show that they have mastered it. Next, you need to set up your stations. I have the stations ready for you to print, and you can edit them if you want, and you just set those up. I tape mine to the wall or I put them on desk, and if you have a large class and you don't have enough room in your classroom for stations, consider going to the library or some other location, even out in the hallways, to get your stations set up. But I have mine in my classroom, and I leave them up all year long because I use these stations every single time we do an essay, and students really get the hang of it after the first or second time. Alright, on to number 4. Strategically plan who will be in each group. Okay, so moving on to this slide, you really want to group people with purpose. The first time you do this, if you don't know the student's writing level, you may be able just to number them off, 1 through 6, and then have them go to their station. But what you really need to do to get the most out of this is group them by level. I learned this from Kelly Gallagher, and he says to list your students from the top to the bottom, and then divide that paper in half. And all the people at the top half you're going to group together in the peer review, and then all the people at the bottom half you're going to group together in the peer review. The reason he says to do this is that if you group a top writer with a struggling writer, neither one are going to grow. The struggling writer is not going to be able to help the top writer, and then the top writer is going to be very aggravated with the struggling writer and not know how to help them. So a advanced writer can learn from a top writer, slightly above average can learn from an advanced, and so forth. So divide that paper in half and then group that way. Another thing to consider is Team Shake. This is an app, but it allows you to group students with a plus, advanced, minus, struggling, or neutral. And then you shake up the app and it will put your students into teams or pairs. Going back to our list, the last thing you need to do is get your timer set. There are lots of timers you can use, but here's a cool one I found. If you just Google, and I'll put the link to it, but if you Google fireplace timer, this one shows up, so you can have a cool fireplace going as you're counting down your stations. I start out with 10 minutes per station, but I find that the more we do it, the less minutes they need. So I think about 8 minutes is probably ideal. After all the prep work you've done, there's not too much left to worry about, but I do have some scenarios to run through that I get questions about all the time. So what could go wrong? Scenario: some students won't be prepared for peer review day. So as a solution, do your check-in work throughout the week that we talked about, where you're monitoring the thesis statement, you're doing the self-check with the highlighting, and you're walking around making sure students are working. Now, I won't pretend that I never have a student who isn't prepared, but for the most part, the only students I ever have who are not prepared enough to participate are the ones who have been absent, or they have had a computer issue and they have lost their essay. So when this happens, I send students to the library to continue writing their essay. If they are not prepared and it is their own fault, they do get docked a grade, because I do give a participation grade for peer review day. Next, scenario your classes are short. Mine are 90 minutes long, so I'm able to get in all of the stations in one day. A simple solution is just to take 2 days to do the stations. Have students start where they left off the next day. As a backup plan, complete as many as you can, but then assign the rest as homework. For example, all of the tech ones, the Grammarly and the Pro Writing Aid, would be great homework stations to complete. And then lastly, you are afraid that your students won't work independently while you are conferencing at your station. So if you don't think your students will work, maybe consider replacing this station with a different one and walk around the room giving each student one-on-one feedback at some point. Or you can ask an assistant or a library helper to work with you for the day. That way you can really get in there and conference with your students who need you. So I hope I have given you all the information you need to have a successful peer review day. And even if you're still a little bit worried by how it might go, I really hope that you give it a try, because here are some of the rewards that you're going to reap from this day. First one, students will grow in their writing. The more they work through these stations, the better their writing is going to get, and these stations are going to help them improve. Number 2, students will become more self-reliant. This is what we are aiming for. We want students to learn how to become better writers and how to self-assess, and these stations will help them achieve that. 3, you will take on the role of the writing teacher instead of the writing editor. This day is all about teaching writing. Instead of getting their final draft and marking all over it, you are teaching them the process and helping them improve before you get their final. And then lastly, the fun one and the awesome one, you will cut down on your grading time. By having students work through these peer review stations, your grading time is going to be cut down by at least a third, maybe a half, because you're not going to have a lot of stuff to mark on their essays. You've already seen their essays multiple times, you've given them feedback, and if they have implemented that feedback and they worked through their grammar using the technology, then your job of grading the final is going to be a much happier job to do. Alright, if you want to save even more time grading, continue watching. Another thing I do to ensure students are getting effective feedback during the writing process is to direct them to this fast and focused feedback wall. So what this is a interactive bulletin board that helps students improve their writing with mini lessons. So for example, if I see that a student needs help with their hook, I direct them to this wall, they pull out a slip of paper, and they read this mini lesson. There's a video they can scan or there's words, so they can take this back to their desk, do the lesson, and then come put it back. There's also grammar help. So for example, if a student is constantly writing in passive voice, they come get the passive voice lesson and improve their writing that way.